2026. And Brooke, could you do our opening karakia, please?
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, ke mā kina kina ke uta, ke mā taratara ke tai. Hihi aki ke te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, te hei mauri ora.
Kia ora, thank you. Just before I move to apologies, I'd just like to welcome Alan Cole, who I think is online. So Alan's chair of the Franklin Local Board. So welcome, Alan. And also Andy Baker is the continuing on as the Auckland Council representative. He isn't online. No, he's not online at the moment.
Bill, Andy's an apology as far as I know today.
Okay, no, thank you. We will note that when we get to apologies, and also like to welcome Angela in terms of representative of the Regional Transport Committee Public Transport Subcommittee. So welcome, Angela. And we will now move to, actually, before I go any further, Alan, I'd just provide an opportunity for you to introduce yourself before we get into the business.
Thanks, Bill. So Alan Cole, I live in Franklin. I'm from the Pukekohe subdivision of the Franklin Local Board. I'm chair this term. I was deputy chair last term. I've been on the Franklin Local Board. This is my 5th term I'm doing now. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this committee. I've heard some great things about what you guys are talking about. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alan, and look forward to your contribution over the triennium. We'll now move to item 2, apologies. And they're on screen. We've got Mayor Mike, Deputy Mayor Joe, who would have been the alternate today, but it's also an apology. Andrew Corkill, his alternate Cole O'Keefe is also an apology. Councillor Andy Baker and also Kevin Lavery from EOY. And then Mayor Tim for lateness. So I'm happy to move those, Eugene. Oh, okay. So we'll put them in for lateness. Thanks. Okay. No, we'll tweak that. Thanks very much, Mayor Ash. So I've moved it, seconded by Eugene. Nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. In terms of item 3, confirmation of the agenda, there are no changes. So the agenda is as sent out. Item 4, are there any disclosures of interest? Oh, okay, sorry. Mover and seconder for confirming the agenda. Okay, I've got Liz and seconded by Chair Warren. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Disclosures of interest. Any members wish to disclose any matters related to items on today's agenda? There are none. Very good. We'll go to item 5, commencing on page 8. Minutes of our 12 December meeting. Brooke, there was a minor amendment.
So just a minor amendment to item 6.2, election of a deputy chair. It was noted that Councillor Gary Maguire had nominated Deputy Mayor Eugene Patterson to be the deputy chair of Futureproof, and that was actually Mike Hedit from Waipa District Council. So that's just been updated in the minutes.
Okay. So I'm happy to move that. Seconded by Maria. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we'll move to item 6.1, commencing on page 16, and that's the Hamilton to Tauranga Spatial Report. You have that in your agenda together with the links to the range of appendices for that document. And if I can ask Robert to provide some context and overview, and then I'll open it up for questions and discussion. Robert.
System is, there we go. So this piece of work was commissioned by Futureproof around about 14 months ago as a series of investigations. It arises out of a couple of things that happened in the last triennium. So firstly, Matamata rejoined Futureproof and was reintegrated into the Futureproof strategy. And the hearings committee on the strategy on the FDS heard a lot of submissions from people in the Matamata district saying, hey, what about us? We should be brought into the settlement pattern. This is really important. Our development should be included, that sort of stuff. And then the second thing is we sat down with NZTA when we were getting closer to having the RONS projects, the Cambridge Tipperary project and the Tauranga project confirmed, and worked out that when those two projects are completed, the reliable travel time between Hamilton and Tauranga will be about an hour and 15 minutes consistently. So instead of sometimes being an hour and 15 minutes and sometimes being 2.5 hours, be consistently an hour and 15 minutes and shorter from Cambridge. And that prompted us all to think, oh, crikey, have we covered the inevitable land use uptake and growth that will come off that increased proximity between those two centres? So the investigation was tasked with answering that question of what is going to happen or what might happen when those RONS expressways are finished, and how will that impact on Matamata, South Waikato, who have contributed at a technical level into this work as well. And so the recommendations, if I was to summarise the recommendations, what they tell us is, fortunately, we have planned for most of the growth that you would expect, but there is a little bit of additional growth even above the high growth projections we had been working on. And that growth isn't just at either end of the corridor. Under all of the scenarios in the papers, you'll see there's a bit of growth in the centre, in Cambridge, Matamata, Te Rau, Pataruru, which we need to plan for. It's new growth. And the report leads you down the path of saying, if I could kind of summarise it really crudely, we should try to encourage the new growth that comes to locate near our existing centres or adjacent to our existing centres where we already have rate-funded infrastructure, rather than turning up somewhere unsupported by infrastructure, which then requires either the developers to carry all the costs of the development or create some expectation that the ratepayer is going to chip in and help with extra pipelines or extra transport connectivity. That's why we're heading down the track of trying to encourage and incentivize growth where we've already got infrastructure to accommodate it. That's probably enough from me. We're not going to do a big presentation. Jim Ebineau, who's led all of the work, is here to answer questions, but I thought we'd just take the papers as read and go from there.
Okay, thanks, Robert. So I'll open it up for questions or comments. Thank you. Mayor Ash.
Probably more a comment, but yeah, I do see it as a pivotal thing. We're talking about the Golden Triangle, and of course, the population speaks for itself. The average from the whole of New Zealand. It's also massive freight linking all going right through. I think there's a couple of critical things that need to be done, or the emphasis needs to be put on. And the first one is the Kaimais, the crossing the road over the Kaimais there. Being an ex-Towie and all, there's a lot of accidents on that road. It's not really fit for purpose for additional traffic. Something needs to be happening there. I mean, ideally, I've spoken to NZTA, and ideally, probably even a tunnel through there would be ideal. Secondly, the Kaimai tunnel for the rail link too, and I think that's pivotal because we've got the Ruakura here with the freight hub as well. It could link through to that. Almost needs to be a second rail tunnel through the, yeah, you know, to get the most out of this. And I think these things need to be in place before we get that. A lot of the times, you know, the Kaimo range there where they cross over the hill there is closed due to major accidents, and it's probably on a regular basis. There'll be stats around that, but I think that's the main focus. You need to get the roading right, or, you know, when you talk about travel times, and probably also need to be that pinch point there at Tauranga there. So I heard that can be a nightmare at certain times of the day. So, you know, I think those things need to be ironed out first. Rail, roading, but probably everything else is pretty much ready to go. You know, like you say, we've got the major roundabout at Periri now, and that's a huge improvement. And also, you know, there was a lot of accidents there too, which now, you know, got a roundabout, obviously safer, and vehicles can get out. So some really good things in there, loving it, but I think that's needs to be the main focus. How are we going to get it?
Fortunately, we have NZTA coming to speak to us next about their work around what they are planning there. So I would make the comment, and this is one of the strengths of Future Proof, is the ability to bring together thinking around what's going to happen with land use with what's going to happen with transport, rather than doing those things in isolation. And so hopefully this work will be really strongly informative of NZTA's work in terms of giving them a sense of the kind of scale of growth they should plan for in terms of extra traffic and where that traffic might want to go and all that sort of stuff.
Got Chair Warren and then Mayor Axel.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just picking up on Ash's points around that. I spoke to Minister Potaka at the Economic Forum, and he is really keen on a tunnels of national significance. So it's something I think probably the time is to strike and get that messaging through. I think you've got ministers that are open to those suggestions in that space, and he mentioned potentially tunnels possibly for trucks only and potentially cars, but yeah, that across the hill is a major issue in that space. So potentially something that this forum may want to push with the ministers at this time. Thank you.
Mayor Axel.
Yeah, I think we find ourselves in violent agreement here, really. Specifically picking up on point 32 in the report, page 26 and 7. There is so much going on at the moment too, though. I just wonder whether our efforts are best spent effectively advocating for the right things to be done by others, NZTA, you know, most notably, and our learned colleague down the bottom there who's, so who are you representing again? That was, let's just say RTC. It's a very long, but actually roading here becomes and transport links become of key importance. And given the fast track and everything else that's happening, I'm just not sure how much time we should be spending on the other bits, if you like, around land use and all the rest of it, because so much is up in the air at the moment, including regional council reorganisations and so on. So it's where do we spend our time? It refers there in point 32 about fast track approvals. In your comments, Robert, I noted we've got 19 in my district. 19 projects. It's outrageous. You know, I don't know how many we have within the future-proof sub-region. There's a picture in here somewhere. I didn't actually count them, but there's a lot. So I think taking more of a monitoring approach. So this line says also recommends monitoring. I almost think monitoring becomes primary. Advocacy, you know, let's say give it equal primary status. And then the rest of it is wait and see a little bit.
Thanks, Mayor Axel. Other comments, questions in terms of the work?
I might just offer a little bit of independent advice now. In terms of that point about how much do we do, I think this study, from my perspective as your independent advisor, kind of takes it as far as we need to go on the corridor for now. But I would stress that notwithstanding reform and fast track and everything else that's going on, before the election, before November, we expect the new planning law to come into place, and this region will have, once that happens, 18 months to prepare a regional spatial plan, which addresses the kind of points raised here. So it's not, we're not really left with the absolute luxury of being able to say we're not going to think about this stuff. We have to get ready for that spatial plan. It will take longer than 18 months to prepare a regional spatial plan.
I agree, and thank you for the independent advice. I have, well, at the mayoral forum, we're already giving thought to what we do, and my recommendation actually is we start now, rather than wait 18 months. And in fact, also, if we can form a view on what is best fit for purpose from a ratepayer community perspective, then come 18 months from now, government doesn't put into a vacuum their view, but we already have our view substantially formed. I know that's not what we've been asked to do, but that's what the mayoral forum is turning its mind to at this time. And at some point, the role of future-proof will become apparent there as we define what is the cluster that naturally sits in the region that we are here, because it probably won't be the entire region that'll naturally look to Hamilton as a centre, but also making good use of our colleagues, regional council, while they are still in those roles, because if we wait, as we've been asked to do, then by the time we get to turn our mind to it, they're no longer available to us in that same way. So that's not an optimal solution either.
Angela.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, agree with what has been said so far. Yeah, just wanted to bring up as well that Smart Growth Partnership with our colleagues over the hill as well, and just the real importance of that alignment and thinking. And I note that it is in the recommendations, but I think the value last trinium of meeting with Smart Growth was really vital, just to get that linked up political thinking as well, and ensuring that within our RLTPs all the investment is signalled as well. So yeah, really fantastic report and great recommendations around rail as well for freight. Yeah, really interested in those tunnels. Yeah, but yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Mayor Ash.
You know, when you talk about tunnels and you know, the way Warren's saying, if you, the modern tunnel making process now is pretty fast. You know, if you go, anyone been over to Italy, you know, you go in one tunnel, come out and you go into another one. It's amazing, you know, like they do it really well and they do it really fast. And, you know, times have changed since the old Kaimai tunnel went through for the rail. You know, I'm sure they'd whack another one through there pretty quick. I know it costs, but, you know, I'm just, you know, thinking about the long-term vision of it. But still reckon, you know, the land development, I think, in my mind, it comes after that. You know, I think you've just got to get the roading networks in that are fit for purpose first. And then I think that falls out of it. But we just need to get that right first. That's economic development. And, yeah.
No, thank you. There's nothing further. We will move to the recommendations, which are before you. And picking up the point that Angela's made, the intent of today is the adoption in principle, and then we'd have a joint meeting of with our Smart Growth colleagues. The proposal there, and I've got one amendment to recommendation 3, is to delete the word independent and replace with regional chairs. So then it reads regional chairs, mayors and chairs of future-proof and smart growth. If we can take out the word independent. My eyes don't tell me that, but I'll believe it. Okay. And then the intent is that we will gather. We've gathered previously twice in Matter to talk about this work together with other initiatives. So if I can have a mover and seconder for recommendations 1, 2, 3. Thanks, Liz. Mayor Axel, there's nothing further. I will put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And I'd just like to acknowledge the work of Jim and the team and Robert in terms of this spatial study. So thanks very much. Well, now we'll move to item 6.2. We've got a presentation by NZTA. I think your earlier comments, Mayor Ash, were a good segue into this presentation and no doubt subsequent discussion. And I'd like to welcome Mark Rushworth, who is a Principal Planning Advisor with NZTA, who's going to take us through. And perhaps it's a relatively short presentation, so we'll go through the presentation and then I'll open it up for questions and comments, Mark. So welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, just apologies from Cole O'Keefe, who was due to be here to present to you today. He's our project sponsor for the Hamilton to Tauranga Strategic Transport Plan. Unfortunately, he's under the weather, so I got delegated the job. I'm project lead for Hamilton to Tauranga, so hopefully I'm a reasonable substitute. So just to kick things off, what I'm hoping to do is say just a brief introduction and overview of the Hamilton to Tauranga Strategic Transport Plan. Setting the scene, this is part of a wider national programme that NZTA Waka Kotahi is developing, which is focused on strategic corridors and urban networks in key locations around the country. We'll just initially look at what the strategic transport plans are. So they are looking to inform an integrated approach to managing, optimizing and improving the strategic transport networks over a 30-year time horizon. And one of the key advantages of looking out over that time frame, one, it gives us a lot of foresight and aligns with some of the longer term strategic planning horizons that are now being looked at. But it also gives us the opportunity to think beyond what the current GPS settings are, because we know over time those will change. And what we want to be able to do is develop a plan that is more enduring, that can be capable of flexing and pivoting to whatever the new settings are as they come along. Because largely the underlying conditions will still be the same. It's just a different prioritization and funding availability during the course of that period that we need to be able to fine tune to. Just trying to think. In the other thing that we want to take from this process, as well as looking at what may be required, is making sure that we've got good intelligence that will feed through into the funding prioritization processes that come through. So for NZTA, our State Highway Investment Proposal, we need to have good, solid evidence to support projects that will go into that. And that will also feed through and cascade into the regional land transport plans and programs that are developed with our regional partners. If we flick to the next slide, please. One back, I think, from that.
Come up to this side, Mike.
There you go. So the strategic plans are are a strategic tool rather than a specific business case. And that's something that we've been looking at. The government has asked us to sharpen up the business case process. And one of the approaches we're looking to develop is do more of that strategic planning thinking up front, so we can have a good understanding of what are the issues, what are we trying to resolve, where are we trying to get to. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel for every business case that comes along. We can say we've done that strategic thinking up front. We know the plan of attack, and then the business cases can actually just get on with focusing on what's needed for individual projects. So let's say the strategic transport plans will set the direction for what needs to change and the future work. It will look at how we establish priorities, and it will identify the activities needed, and say that will then cascade into what the business case process is. And the little flow diagram at the bottom is sort of indicating that the starting point, the red square, is strategic transport planning, and then that informs how we develop the resourcing work programming going forward, and feeding into those business cases, which will hopefully be a sharper, more focused exercise at that time. If we go to the next slide, please. So starting to zoom in now onto the more regional aspects of strategic transport planning. In the Waikato, we've got a number of projects that are underway. The two live ones are Hamilton to Tauranga, and at the other end of the network is the Tauranga Urban Network. Those projects we are in the process of doing procurement and kicking off at the moment. We also have another plan for the corridor from Pairiri through to Waiouru, picking up State Highway 1 running south through the remainder of the Waikato in that direction. And the opportunity here is that this will provide us with a good integrated approach to those strategic plans, rather than in the past where things have been done much more in isolation. We're hoping to make sure that we've really thought about the wider system and how we plug all these parts of the network in together. We've been having some initial discussions with partners or staff from partner organisations, and that includes the work that you've just been hearing about, that has been done on the spatial study. And no surprise to you when you look at the blue line on the plan there, the footprint of the strategic transport plan and the spatial study are pretty much identical. And that's, I say, not by chance, that's by design, that we wanted to make sure that there was integration between the different land use and transport projects that are happening in the area. As we go forward, we intend to continue to work closely with stakeholders, with council staff, with iwi and hapu, and make sure that we get good input and knowledge from your organisations as we develop the detail of the work. So zooming in a bit more detail on the Hamilton to Tauranga study area, as I mentioned, it coincides with the spatial study. What we're looking at here is breaking this down into different components, key components of the strategic transport network. So you can see on there, the red line is State Highway 1. We know we've already got a major RONS project running along there, but we don't want to just take for granted that that has solved all the problems. It will go a long way to improving things. But as you've also been hearing, there's a lot of interest in fast track development happening around Hamilton. And we want to make sure that parts of the expressway, how will they respond to additional growth beyond what we were previously anticipating? So we've got a chance to bring that into our thinking. State Highway 29, as mentioned by Mayor Ash, going over The Kaimais is a key component of the network that is probably the last bit of the RONS sort of network that hasn't been fully planned for yet. So we've broken that down into two components, from Pariri through to Poi and the foot of the Kaimai, sort of the flatter section, and then there's a steeper section rising up and going over the Kaimais and dropping down to Tauranga. They've got different characteristics and are likely to have different issues that we need to think about. And also been mentioned. So I don't think at this stage we want to jump to a conclusion as to what the appropriate response and treatment is going to be. But that's an indication of a different way of thinking about that section of the corridor to other sections. So that's allowing us to break down and focus on those different elements. The orange areas pick up the what we've referred to as the secondary state highway, so 27, 24, I think it is, and part of State Highway 5 that run through that area. Again, important to think of those and their function, the linkages that they create to settlements within the area, but also the wider transport network through there. And then finally, at the top of the study area is the rail corridor. And again, that's been mentioned earlier this morning. We are not just looking at the strategic road network. We are building in the rail function and making sure that we understand that. Obviously, there's been quite a lot of activity in recent times with the Ruakura Inland Port getting set up and starting to operate. They've certainly got ambitions to grow significantly. So how does that factor in terms of particularly the freight movement? We also know that there has been interest as well in the potential for passenger services. I believe there was an announcement yesterday on Tahuia extending the trial period. So, there's opportunity to make sure that we take a balanced approach when we're looking at the transport network, not necessarily having to put all our eggs in one basket, and making sure that we have a good integrated understanding of the area and how we can respond to that. Go to the next slide, please. So I think this is the last slide. So just wrapping up really here in terms of what we or what the program is looking like. So we are essentially running the project through the course of this year. We hope to have wrapped up before the end of the year. We're currently just underway with part one, which is starting to look and understand what the future scenarios are. So, we can build in intelligence and information coming through from things like the spatial study, layering that on top of existing knowledge around the future development strategies and growth projections that exist across the corridor. And I say that's not just looking within future-proof areas, picking up what's happening on the smart growth end of the corridor as well, so we can make sure that we've got a comprehensive view there. We will be reviewing the traffic modelling. There's different traffic models that sit either side of the Kaimais. We need to make sure that we have a consistent way of addressing and thinking about what the traffic movements are going to be, and have confidence that certainly there's a good integration with that thinking. And I say we will build in what we know from the current direction, including what's coming up on the horizon, things like the fast track applications as well, because they collectively are quite significant, and I think there's some update on that later in the agenda for you today. Currently, we're just concluding the procurement phase, and say we will get really motoring with the part one work through the rest of this month and March. Stage two or part two, that will allow us to develop more on those future scenarios of, say, building on intelligence that we're gathering from things like the spatial study and looking at the developer interest within the corridor. We will be doing the options analysis to understand what are the range of options that could be available. There will be a whole range of things, as you say, when you look at those different segments of the corridor, it's, there's no one silver bullet that resolves all of the issues. There's going to be a whole bunch of different things that we'll need to think about and different timeframes as well. So what we will be looking at over that 30-year time horizon is where do we need to get to at the end of that? But what can we do as we progress through that? So probably looking more into sort of 10-year time horizons, first 10-year, middle 10-year, final 10-year, as to what will be a sensible way to approach things in there. And the scenarios that we develop will help us to understand sort of what tools we have available to work with over those timeframes. And we will be working with stakeholders. So your council staff will be part of the process as we work our way into that detail. And then the final part 3 stage is really then bringing it all together, getting down to a short list, understanding what the urgency of any particular responses are, how do we prioritize things, where are the dependencies, what are the trigger points. And I think probably at this stage, what I'd like to sort of finish on is to say that this is a plan that's going to help us navigate to where we need to get to. It isn't a business case, as you know. We're not trying to justify a specific project and deliver individual projects. This is the roadmap that will help us navigate our way through. As you all understand, it's a very changeable environment that we're operating within at the moment. We don't have any greater insight into how things are going to land in the short term, never mind the long term. What we are intending to do, though, is build a plan that is enduring, that has the ability to flex and pivot, and it will get us to where we need to be. There will be different ways that you can get there, and that's fine, because that can respond to the real world changes that happen along the way, and make sure that the plan can stay live and we can all have that certainty going forward. And that will then feed back to the work that you're going to be doing with regional spatial strategies and understanding where are the infrastructure corridors that you want to invest in. So this will be part of that story. With that, I think I'll conclude and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark. And I'll open it up. I've got here Axel.
Yeah, just reflecting on those closing comments, which I agree with, that certainty to allow for planning. So there's 2 things that come out of it for me. One, your very first slide, when you talk about managing, optimizing and enhancing over the next 30 years, I wonder if you could do a small addendum, Mark. Could you just add 20 years? That would be great. And I say that in all seriousness because in this region in particular, we think about the discussions around the Kaimais, we think about Southern Links. 30 years is not long enough. Southern Links, the status of which from, outside of 20, inside of 10, road of national significance, back inside the 20, back inside, 20, 30 years is not long enough, given how long it actually takes us to deliver. So that's not a criticism, it's really a challenge. And in our own district 1B, for example, the revocation of 1B, which is the preference of NZTA currently, inside the 30-year time frame, that's probably right. Inside the 50-year time frame, it's probably completely wrong. So it matters. It matters. It affects decisions that are made in the short term. That's my first point. How do we, as a future-proof grouping, even advocate for that long-term bipartisan, leave it alone, for adapted strategies to give us certainty to respond with all the bits that feed into to these network decisions. That's really, really important. So that's, maybe I'll say my second point, that I think that's probably the most important point. We've seen so many changes, and you rightly refer to, in current times, there's a lot of change in dynamic environment. There shouldn't be. Not for a 30-year infrastructure plan. There shouldn't be current uncertainty. So how do we lobby or make that point, particularly in an election year? Do we add future-proof's voice to that? Hey, can we have some bipartisan stability around long-term infrastructural plans so they don't get mucked around with on a 3-year cycle?
Your Ash.
Yeah, more another statement, really. It's a little bit, it's not really off topic, but it sort of is. Problem we've got, and I was just saying to Warren this morning, you know, that we've got all these things that we want to do, and a lot of it going back to timeframes, like Axel saying about being able to deliver and how long it takes. It's basically down to we don't have the money, you know. And I said the other day, you know, like New Zealand's got 5.4 million people. There's probably only 1.5 million people paying tax. There's another 1.5 that are avoiding paying any tax. We just don't have the money. And I said to Warren this morning, in reality, probably half New Zealand roads should be gravel. Now that's the reality of it. How do we, and I don't know if it's part of this community, you know, this group here could get a message across. The government need to wake up, or whether it's NZTA or whatever, we need to do toll roads. Just about every other country you go to, you have tolls on the roads, which becomes more a user pays, but it also gives substantial amount of money. And I rang up a radio station, and probably must have been 7 or 8 years ago, and I said, we need to put a toll on the Bombay Hills. $2 in, $2 out. $2 in goes to Auckland Northern roads, $2 out goes to Waikato, Coromandel roads, and wherever. And we need more of that. We really need to, because then all of a sudden you've got an income straight away from day one where you can start borrowing billions of dollars and start getting this work done. Because it's all very well we sit around and we talk about, oh, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that, we'd like to do a tunnel, we'd like to do another harbour bridge, but we don't have the money. I don't know if we can feed that in, because, you know, we need to wake up. We just don't have the funds.
Yeah, that's obviously a big challenge, and the approach that we're taking is that we'll certainly be looking at the affordability aspects of the various options that get identified. So, you know, we need to be based in terms of reality. How that's funded, obviously, government is looking at a range of different funding tools, and you know, they are exploring expanding tolling. So that's again will be part of the mix in terms of you know, what are the options available. Yeah, I don't think at this stage I can say how this will all be funded, but what we are looking to do is make sure that we've got, say, a good menu of transport interventions that can be selected from based on whatever the priorities and settings are of the day. So, you know, if that's funding sensitive, you can look at it and say, well, you know, what can we do within the budget that we've got available so we can make sure we keep moving forward. But if you want to put a different lens on it, to say, you know, you want to be more outcome driven, you know, as Robert mentioned earlier about, you know, the journey reliability, you want to focus on that, then you can sort of select that menu and say, okay, well, if that's your priority, this is what you do. It will come at this price. And, you know, then you can have the debate as to, do you really want to do that? Is it affordable? How does that line up with other projects you've got? And I think one of the opportunities with this piece of work is sitting alongside the spatial study, is allowing us to think about, you know, the growth component as well. You have heard the Minister in the past saying growth pays for growth. I know there are challenges with that, but, you know, it is part of the mix as well, in terms of, you know, we don't just think of transport in isolation. It is part of a wider system, and how can we use the transport system to support the growth initiative, and how can growth help pay for some of the transport solutions that are required for it. So we will be having a look at some of those things. We say we won't be delivering the funding through this project. That's somebody else's job later, but it will certainly give us a good sense of what the range of interventions are, what the affordability of that will be, and then that will help inform those decisions going forward in terms of those funding processes.
You're excellent.
Yeah, just arising out of Ash's comments there, Mark, in saying that the government are looking at opportunities to expand where we toll, which I welcome. Is there any thought at all given to the roads that we control as territorial authorities? Or are they thinking just of themselves and their network?
Unfortunately, I'm not close enough to the action to be able to give you a steer on that one. So,
but there's an interesting point there, isn't it? And for us as future proof, we actually control a lot of roads. We build a lot of roads, maintain a lot of roads. I know there's a far rate in a lot of it, but half of it's ours. And the ability to toll, I don't know why theoretically it should be restricted to the national highway system. You know, we've got a second harbour crossing in Raglan coming up. You know, if you leave the existing one there, so there's an alternative free route, could there be a toll on the new one? I don't know. It's not even in scope at the moment. Another example that comes to mind is the unintended consequence of putting 52-ton trucks on 100-year-old bridges that were designed for a horse and cart. You know, major stress on all of that infrastructure as a result of a government change, and yet we don't, you know, have an ability to just wave a wand for extra money there. But maybe tolling or other ways of funding those things, you know, should be thought of as part of this overall review. I don't know where that fits in, but we've got a lot of bridges that are under pressure now in the rural network in particular.
Just as a matter of interest, Mayor Axel, the 2 toll roads originally in Tauranga were local roads. However, they needed empowering legislation for them specifically, but they did start off as under local authority control for some. Just clarification, Mark, in terms of discussion around tolling and funding, do I take it though that tolling as a potential funding mechanism is in scope in terms of this work, or has it been left to more national-wide initiatives?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be delving into a great deal of detail in that aspect. I think what we will be conscious of are what are potential funding streams. We won't be working up detail in terms of you know, what a tolling scheme should be, but it could look at, you know, what funding might be available and related to the nature of the work involved. So, you know, for instance, if there were to be a tunnel at the end of it, then, you know, that's a hefty bit of kit, and one would probably think that would need different funding mechanisms to putting in maybe a passing lane on a currently sort of 1+1 section of the road. So I think we will be conscious of the different implications and trying to identify where there may be areas that we will need to think about how we can approach funding, but we're not necessarily going to be getting into the specifics of that.
No, thank you. Maria. And then Eugene.
Bill, Robert, Brooke, tēnā koe mo tō karakia, o tira tātou katoa kua whakakao mai mo te kaupapa te take. Thank you, Mark, for your mahi. I'll try and keep it brief. Regarding the future identified plans and the aspiration to work with iwi and hapu, we know that engagement across all our major stakeholders is extremely important in whatever we do. In the interest of time, resource and alignment, Have you thought about how you will bring such a large group together? Will you be meeting with them individually? In that scope, you've got a whole range of iwi and hapu, and if you're thinking of going out to Waiuru, that also opens up another big span of people to engage with. How are you going to do that, considering time resources?
Yes, fortunately, the Pairiri to Waiuru is a separate project, so we don't need to worry about that just today. But that was giving you an example of how we will integrate the strategic transport plans throughout the region. You're quite right. There's a wide range of iwi and hapu across the study area. We are currently working on how we can try to make sure that it's effective engagement, but streamline that as much as possible to make it accessible and easy for participation. One of the starting points is that there are a number of established working groups that are already in place. So for the Ron's project, Hamilton Southern Links has got its Tangata Whenua working group. There is also a representation on the Cambridge to Pairiri. So we've got some start points where we can go and engage. I think what we want to do though is make sure that we provide an open opportunity for involvement. So we will be reaching out and asking how do you want to be engaged in this process? And I think we may look to see if we can identify some mechanisms to help streamline it and make it more readily accessible. We know there's a lot going on, and some of these projects aren't always the easiest to get your head around and know how to engage with it. But
Thank you, Mark. That's a fantastic start point, and one I'm well aware of, and integrated being the key word. So the streamline, I'm glad to hear that, and how can we integrate them and have all those people at the table at the one time? So something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eugene.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just sort of supporting Ash's comments. We talk when we sit in forums like this, and the forums we sit outside of these that we're all involved in, it's always about the dollars, and we never have enough of them, as mentioned. And we really do need to keep pushing from these forums about bipartisan and central government, because we've got very little dollars, and then when we have no agreements in that space, the road that we're on and working in and putting a lot of time in is not straight. It's always like this, and so there's always when there's changes in the GPS, we're sitting and restarting again and again and again. And so when we do that, the little amount of dollars we do have, we waste hundreds of millions of dollars every time, and we still get nowhere. So, I think that bipartisan push, in any forum we all sit in, we need to keep advocating for that. I see Minister Bishop and McAnulty yesterday talking about a 30-year infrastructure plan, and some of them they're a little bit aligned in discussion, and some of them they're absolutely not. So, it's still a worrying space, that. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Oh, nothing. Was just trying to tune it off.
Okay, I'll just ask Robert. He's got a couple of comments.
So this is a follow-up to the funding question that Mayor Axel was asking. So I've been doing some frantic fact-checking on Google as we speak. So the Land Transport Management Time of Use Charging Amendment Act has been passed, and that does provide for local authorities in conjunction with NZTA to put in place congestion charges, time of use charges, things like that on local roads. It's not just the state highway network. It has to be done in conjunction with NZTA. NZTA holds the casting vote on the decision making if it came to a split. That was only passed in November, so we haven't really all had a time to think about how we would apply that. I suspect we'll all be waiting to see how it goes in Auckland before we invest a whole lot of effort trying to make it work elsewhere in the country. But
just want to publicly acknowledge and thank you for the first real-time fact check during my tenure as mayor. Appreciate that. But actually, it's a good answer, isn't it? So there is opportunity there that I was not actually aware of. And I guess we haven't turned our minds to how that might actually fit into our processes. We're coming up to an annual plan view and an LGP discussion following that. So this could actually be another tool in the toolkit, couldn't it? That's really useful. Thank you.
There's no other questions. What I'd like to do is extend an invitation to you, Mark, at a later date and meeting when you've progressed the study to a particular point, to come back and actually have a discussion and an opportunity for those around the table to feed in and contribute their views before the work is finalised. I just think in terms of that type of partnership discussion and input into the process would be quite helpful. So I just extend that to you to consider. The other thing, just picking up, and I think, Mayor Axel, you might have raised it in terms of the advocacy and particularly in terms of infrastructure planning and timeframes and all of that package. I think that's again a topic for our next meeting with Minister Bishop. So in terms of putting some of those issues forward. So in terms of the role of the future-proof mayors and regional chair, myself and Robert, using those forums too in terms of that continual. We'll pick that up as one of the topics for our next ministerial session. Anything, Robert, from? Okay. There's nothing further. We've got a recommendation there to receive the presentation. It's been moved by Mayor Tim, seconded by Mayor Ash. There's nothing further. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So thanks very much, Mark, and certainly welcome you back as the study progresses for some input. Thank you. So we'll now move to item 6.3, and that's the Priority Development Area Reports. I'd like to welcome Sonia from HCC in terms of that. Robert, any commentary before Sonia?
So I think when we did your induction, we gave you a very once over lightly of the Priority Development Area program and promised to come back with a more fulsome report about what our priority development areas were, where our areas of focus were, and particularly any challenges that we're identifying as we seek to do everything we can to assist those areas to develop and to move forward, and to, as a partnership, remove any unintended or intended, to remove any barriers or blockages that are holding back progress in the opening up of those development areas. So this report does both that, what are the problems we're finding and how are we going reporting, but also gives you a bit of background in the detail. I think Sonia's just going to focus on the how are things going bit of the report. So over to you, Sonia.
Yes. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you. Kia ora tautau. So today I'm going to be reporting on the
state. You just move the microphone closer to you. Thank you.
That better?
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, that's better, isn't it? So today I'm going to be reporting on the status of the 6 priority development areas, the key constraints and areas where we need the committee's attention in this changing environment. The trackers within the report provide a consistent evidence base across the region for where support and alignment are needed most. They also represent our highest impact locations, both in terms of housing supply and long-term economic productivity. So this report update covers progress since last June. It identifies the risks and challenges that are emerging and outlines the areas where we need partnership action. It also includes, for your information, and as Robert said, a recap and deep dive of the 6 priority development areas, which I won't be focusing on today, but I'm always happy to take questions on those.
So there have been a number of highlights from the last 8 months, which has seen both momentum and pressure. Momentum in Ruakura with enabling works in the industrial area progressing well, and this has been supported by the Eastern Transport Corridor design funding. The North Waipa South Hamilton spatial study is advancing but requires significant staff input. And the waters reform transition is also progressing really well and promising long-term benefits. The pressure that I spoke of has come as Fast Track continues to drive workload, and with new listings including the Brima Farms, Rogerson Block and Te Kowhai East, but there are also several other referral applications which are being prepared as well. And this is adding real pressure on councils and NZTA capacity. So moving to the PDA tracker summary, the tracker represents a traffic light view by enablers. And it's quite difficult to see there, but in a nutshell, it shows that Huntly faces affordability constraints, whereby targeted rates to fund wastewater upgrades are becoming increasingly difficult for communities. Northwest Hamilton and Horutu is moving forward with the Rotakoti Greenway corridor underway and the arterial notice of requirement decision, which was released last December. Hamilton Central and Fairfield Enderley continue to face major funding and financing constraints for transport and Three Waters infrastructure. And finally, North Waipa, South Hamilton is resource intensive and still facing uncertainty on key dependencies such as Southern Links and wastewater treatment capacity. So the tracker summary is supported by the PDA metrics. These numbers remind us of scale and impact and help us to prioritise where infrastructure investment yields the highest regional impact. For example, Northwest Hamilton Horutu is predicted to have around 9,000 homes over the next 50 years, while Ruakura will have approximately 5,000 new homes, and it's also a nationally significant employment hub. And North Waipa, South Hamilton will have around 7,003 homes and about 1,200 hectares of commercial and industrial land. So moving to the key focus of this report. Next slide. Great. Thanks, Lyndall. Across all of the priority development areas, the key regional actions we need your support to anchor and progress this year are maintaining a PDA first approach to infrastructure sequencing, strengthening our relationships with the new water entities at both political and operational levels before investment decisions diverge. And the last key point is we need to start to manage Fast Track carefully to ensure it doesn't undermine sequencing or create network issues, and to ensure it complements rather than fragments our future-proof strategy. So building on the action plan, this slide highlights that we're now operating in a materially different funding and development environment, where rates capping severely limits the ability to fund infrastructure. Growth doesn't fully pay for growth itself until communities are built. So councils and providers will still need to raise debt, while developers are also struggling with infrastructure cost pressures. While the water reform introduces some really great opportunities, it's still going to take time to embed. We need to recognise that. And lastly, the development model is shifting, and councils are increasingly reacting to developer-led structure plans rather than shaping them. That risks fragmentation unless we stay aligned to the PDA framework. So with that said, our primary issue is that many first tranche fast track proposals sit within priority development areas already. And actually that alignment is really positive. But the detail and the sequencing of these developments still carry real risk. Capacity across partners to respond is already stretched, and we're finding that new proposals are less consistently aligned. We need to maintain a cohesive regional position as we respond to fast track to not only deliver the future-proof strategy, but also protect the investment already made in PDAs and avoid cost blowouts and network congestion. The strategic question we pose up here on the slide today is essentially asking, at what point do we escalate concerns about cumulative network and funding impacts? And what consistent regional narrative do we want to lead with? This is just a final slide, and it's just a quick reminder that on the left-hand side are our 6 focus areas for 2025-26. The other areas continue to be monitored, but these are where coordinated regional effort delivers the greatest strategic return. And I'd just like to finish by saying the PDA framework is not about slowing growth, it's about sequencing it responsibly. And if we maintain alignment, we protect ratepayers, reduce network risk, and maximise return on investment already committed. If we fragment, the long-term costs will be higher. So with that said, I welcome your questions and direction on where you would like the collective effort focus next.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks very much, Sonia. Just in terms of how we deal with this, Lyndall, can you go back to the slide with the strategic, that one. In public excluded, we have a report and discussion on fast track. I'd like to suggest that we have a discussion on the strategic question in public excluded once we've had the presentation and discussion around fast track, because I think that will provide then the context in terms of having a discussion around the question and what the committee would like to do in respect of that. So I just wanted to put that on the table early, but very happy in terms of any questions to Sonia or discussion on the other matters that she has presented on. I'll open that up now. Okay, I've got Mayor Ash and I've got Mayor Mike.
Yeah, me again. Hey, so yeah, I noticed you mentioned about Huntley and the wastewater, the cost of the wastewater, and all our councils, and Michael attest to this too, we're under the same pump. Years ago when I was the previous mayor, I took a particular interest in the Three Waters space, and we talk about funding it and how we're going to fund things, but the real problem as to why, in my mind, we've got to where we are, and I'll give you a couple of examples around that, and I'm sure every council is in the same boat. But in our particular area, the wastewater treatment plant upgrade in Matamata, in our long-term plan, which I would have been a part of previously, we had $11 million for an upgrade there starting last year, which has started now. They go to start it, that's now 64 to 68 million. So it's a little bit hard when you're looking at your long-term plans and you're putting figures in there, and then it blows out to that degree. Now, our neighbouring council too, small wastewater treatment plant, they had 8 million in their long-term plan, that's now 40 million. Now, I found out, and I'm going to do some more digging around this, it's chasing down nitrate levels. So basically, we're building these plants now to a level where it's just about drinkable, going back into a river that's not drinkable. But to get to that stage, cutting down by 1 or 2%, it's costing tens of millions of dollars to get there. Now, an example for the neighbouring one, I've heard that they only contribute 3% nitrates going into that stream. But they've got to get it down lower, and of course then the blowouts to 40 mil. In our case, it's very similar, and we're probably only producing 6%. Because anywhere you have native bush or bushlands or any streams coming in, you get natural nitrates in the streams anyway. So what I'm getting to is that the regulators, and whether it's Taumata Arawhai or whether it's coming from regional councils, and I will find out, that needs to be addressed, because this is, once again, you know, we've got champagne taste in the beer budget, but someone has to pay, and unfortunately, it's our ratepayers. I also believe that it's forcing us into looking at different, setting up entities of, you know, which we are into, Waikato Waters Limited, you know, and I'm not convinced that's the best option. But yes, we're making it unaffordable for our ratepayers. We're definitely doing a good job of that. If I was the mayor previously, I would have told the government or the regulator, Taumata Arawhai, we've got $11 million for that upgrade. That's it. You find the rest. If you want, you know, gold plated, someone else has to pay, because our communities can't afford it. So we need to step up and identify that. That's the only comment.
No, thank you. Mayor Mike.
Is that working?
You're right now.
We just spent 110 million ish. No, but I've got a couple of comments. So I'll make a statement because then it doesn't get into the PX stuff. But around the fast track stuff, you know, when it comes through, the councils have a lot less control over what will happen. So, which leads to my next one really around plan changes, or it could be fast track or anything like that actually. And it's terms of plan changes come through, and I understand about the alignment. But if they get through a process and they get approved, and I'm talking really subdivisions in particular, but it could be industrial too, but industrial in our area and Waipa gets chewed up pretty quickly. But the asset gets vested back in the council nice and early, you know, as a developer wants to do. The problem is, in the current state, there's very few houses when it gets vested. And so we start paying that when there's no income. And so just your views on that of, I mean, we're about to have that discussion, I guess, about actually you can keep your assets until there's actually a few people kicking in for some rates in your subdivision. So I'd just like some comments on that.
Really good point, and I think we're all actually facing that issue where we have developed areas, and unfortunately the market hasn't responded as favourably as what developers have wanted or as we've projected ourselves. I don't necessarily have the answer, so I'll throw it out to my colleagues or Robert, if you do.
I haven't got the answer, but I think there is a much more nuanced conversation to be had about growth pays for growth. So there is a line of thought that growth pays for growth that we need to unpick with ministers and with some of their advisors for exactly the reason that you've pointed out. There's inevitably a debt that hangs over in there because you can't negotiate that stuff through PDAs with your developers.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue investigating. I mean, we can't go backwards, but plan changes keep coming forward. We can deal with what's in front of us, and we can't deal with how we've dealt with it in the past. Is what everyone will be realising.
Mayor Axel.
Yeah, just a comment on Ash's kōrero, and then a question for you, Sonia. I totally agree about the standards and the fact that we need to actually speak on that Mirror Forum and Future Proof alike. I went to the Economic Forum there last week, and I know some of us, others were there as well. There's a really interesting statistic that was presented by one of the presenters that the quality adjusted life year, the value of a life, which is a sort of a funny thing to talk about, but it's useful when government makes decisions about, you know, do you fund this drug? Do you put a median barrier down the middle of this highway or not, right? And there isn't one number. Treasury have got one number, which is $40,000 per life year, quality adjusted. Pharmac, or the health ministry, uses $80,000 per year, which is based on GDP, which is kind of weird to base it on GDP, but that's the number they use to decide when to fund something and when not. And I think NZTA is probably the most robust in the way that they actually come up with that number, and that number is 400,000 per life year. So you put a barrier or do safety improvements based on the number of life years you're saying, that when it comes to the water, the change in drinking water standards, I don't think they used any number at all. I don't actually know, but I suspect they said people in Hawke's Bay died or got sick, must go to that must never happen again. And there goes the standard. So I think there's a good point here in questioning respectfully, what drives these decisions, because it's got implications of millions of dollars. And now the drinking water as well as wastewater standards for discharge is the largest driver of unaffordability for our community. Now, forget targeted rates, forget general rates, we can get those under control. But in that three water space, boy, we've got some pressures that we have to respond to with changing standards, driving unaffordability. Got a second point, but if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, just on that comment, because I know Tauranga, they push, let's face it, Havelock North, and this is where another point is we respond with knee-jerk reactions. We governments do that, and they bring up Havelock North. But if you have a look at that, Havelock North was actually a compliant plant. Okay. The second phase to that is it was E. coli that got into the water. They weren't chlorinating the plant. It was UV only. If it was chlorinated, it kills E. coli. So there's factors in there that are relatively simple and very inexpensive to implement so that never happens again. Don't need to build more water plants with high technology, because I think everyone in this room sit around. I've never had an issue drinking the water anywhere in New Zealand when I've been travelling around. Never have. Sometimes, yes, there might be boiled water notices. Councils have never guaranteed 24/7 water. Never have. So we just have to be careful when we're using facts and figures. And another one they used was more recent times, a school camp where kids got sick and some kids went into hospital for 10 days. Yeah, that's unfortunate. But once again, they left out that it wasn't council reticulated water. Once again, it was treated UV locally on site. So sometimes we get this information that sounds really, we've got to act, but maybe we don't. We just need to be a bit more sensible.
And certainly in our area, probably yours as well, Ash, half of our resident ratepayers aren't on town supply at all. They drink off the roof and there's no standards at all. We're all very comfortable with zero standards. It's inconsistent. Thank you for patiently waiting. Sonia, I do have a question for you. On page 44 of our agenda, the one that's under action plan, key focus for 2026. In the very first point there, Huntley Mahu Pokeka, you talk about delays due to lack of ownership, change in personnel and organisational perspectives. Can you just expand that for me a little bit, please?
So we did have we talked collectively and had advice from your staff that the momentum with that project has slowed or been delayed at times because of all of the change that's occurred with personnel, but also with sort of getting in front of the right people to have the right huis, and that has been challenging, and they've recognised that it has caused a significant delay. And so that's why one of our messaging today is around really supporting that alignment and ensuring that we are collectively working together to remove those barriers that they've been facing in that instance.
So that's an us problem. It's our staff, our people, our consultants, other priorities, or being reallocated to different tasks, etc. So it's an us problem.
Yeah.
If I go global us, including
Global
government
us.
agencies. So if you think about the Rahui Pokeka work, a key player in that was Kāinga Ora.
Yeah.
Their priorities shifted with the election. But we've created, prior to that, an expectation with the community that work would happen in a certain way, and we've been trying to keep that going and alive. But one of the major participants hasn't been able to focus on it, has had new people come and go, that kind of stuff. And it is I suppose if we reflect on trying to work in a partnership, that is the hard thing of partnership. Every agency goes through its cycle of churn, and it's you got to keep working to maintain connections and partnership relationships. And there is a cost burden sitting in doing that. And so Sonia's partially acknowledging that, but also saying when we set expectations, we do need to be alert to and manage the risk that our partners might have to change their priorities and focus. And maybe we should think about whether that changes what we plan.
But
Or
if
stores.
so, we should be upfront about that and allow different arrangements to be put in place rather than the work languishing, I think is what I'm hearing. So effectively, this point asks that members, whoever they are, in the particular work stream or group, actually do what they committed to do. Thank you.
Nothing further. So proposing that we go to recommendation 1 to receive the report only, and we'll come back, as I mentioned earlier, to the subsequent recommendation after we've had that discussion on fast track. So if I can have a mover and seconder to receive the report, I've had Mayor Ash, seconded by Mayor Tim. And nothing further, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And thanks very much, Sonia, for all the work in that space and bringing together a whole range of people in terms of that PDA process. So we'll now move to the last item on the agenda in the open section. And that's item 6.4, commencing on page 62, and that's Robert's advisor report. So over to you, Robert.
Okay, so I'll take the large part of the report as read. I'll just highlight there is one activity when I look through my list of things I've been up to in the last quarter that I had missed. So I'm continuing to work with and to support the team at Waikato District to open channels with Auckland Council around the transport connectivity across Pocono and into the Old Franklin District area effectively. So noting Alan's on the call. Alan and I have been chatting in email as well about how we get some momentum around thinking about those cross-boundary issues at the north. Obviously, Auckland Transport, we were talking to Auckland Transport. Auckland Transport doesn't exist anymore. So we're having to work out who it is in Auckland Council that we can work with. But we're hopeful that we'll be able to get a conversation underway around the freight connectivity, rural freight issues that were highlighted in the previous triennium and clearly exist as we get more and more growth around Pocono and Pukekohe. The other matter you'll see in addition to the report, I think I presented this report at our December meeting, but in addition, we've now added our risk register, which is the register of very high and high program risks I work through with your chief executives, with an idea of the kind of actions we're putting in place to mitigate them. At the moment, the risk that I'm most focused on, or we are collectively most focused on, is right-sizing what we do within future-proof, given all of the other constraints that are hitting your organisation in terms of your capacity to do strategic planning. It kind of relates to Mayor Axel's earlier point around what do we do next with the Hamilton to Tauranga study. So we are in a phase of constantly trying to reprioritize what we deliver within the future-proof program in this uncertain environment to make sure your staff have the capacity to deal with things like the fast track applications that we're about to talk about. It is a challenge, and it wraps up in that how much, I suppose my mantra in my head as your independent advisor is what's the least regret stuff that we have the capacity to get on with that allows us to position this region as well as possible for a regional spatial plan. So working on the presumption that at one point Future-Proof will hand over all of its knowledge to whatever entity's running a regional spatial plan. How can we make sure they're as well set up as possible to reflect the needs of the sub-region in that regional plan? And so that relates to the risk around, the risk that is identified on the table around capacity, staff capacity and change and all that, those sort of things, which I think are two early risks: organisation capacity and changes in representation. That's all I need to report on this one.
Okay, thanks, Robert. I'll open it up for questions or comments, and I've got Alan online. Over to you, Alan.
A little bit of an update on Auckland Transport. So we're just waiting for the royal assent next month for that new legislation to be approved. And then there's going to be like a 6-month committee to actually work on the bringing Auckland Transport onto Auckland Council. So there probably won't be much ability to have decisions made until later in the year. And at the moment, it's still unclear what Auckland Council and the local boards will have authority over on the road corridors. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Other questions or comments in terms of Robert's report? Liz.
Look, just a quick comment. I'm really quite pleased to see the risk register now in your report, but I think it's crucial, especially when we just simply, within such a fast changing environment, and your thoughts on which areas are we at most risk of is just really helpful to keep our eye on these matters, I think.
Thanks, Liz. There's nothing further. We've got recommendation there to receive the report. If I can have a mover and seconder for that, please. Thanks, Mayor Axel. Seconder. Mayor Tim. There's nothing further. I shall put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So we will now move into public excluded and resolution on page 74. For that, if I can have a mover and seconder. Thanks, Mayor Ash. A seconder. Thanks, Maria. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Pause, don't you? Tim.